Good morning. My name is Carrie Millhouse. I am a licensed professional counselor who works at a private practice in Thomasville. And the topic today, I was going to tie social media use and mental health issues. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about how to discuss social media use with your children, what the recommendations are, the dangers, that kind of thing. So this will relate to that. I'll probably repeat some of the same things, but it's really helping you understand when you're seeing signs in your child that may let you know you need to seek professional help. Not just things related to social media, but I'm going to tie that together as well. So, but tell me, if you will, I didn't meet you last time, so what age are your children?
I'm Elizabeth, and this is my husband Chris, and we've got twin, almost 9-year-old boys. They'll be 9 on the 31st.
Okay.
And a 10, almost 11-year-old daughter.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. And your daughter?
Thomas, she's 7.
She's 7. Okay, great. So, and I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. So I'm a, yeah, that's right. I had to think about that a minute. I was like, can that be? Is he really 14? You know, it feels like just yesterday I had the trauma of realizing I'm now the parent of 2 teenagers, but it was more than yesterday. It was a year and some ago. Anyway, but in my practice, I see about, right now, somewhere between 50 and 60% are teenagers. I do see children as young as 10, but I try and cap it there because we have a lot of people in my practice who prefer the younger children, and I kind of prefer when they're a little bit older. So, but what I wanted to say is that I'm very concerned about what I see going on with social media use, and everybody, frankly, not just children, but adults. You cannot go anywhere without seeing somebody like on their phone. Restaurants, I mean, that's the worst to me, when you're sitting and having a meal and everybody sitting there is on their phone. I'm like, oh, I just cringe. So what we're finding in the mental health arena is that we're seeing increases in anxiety and depression. And those things are also linked to other problems like eating disorders. For example, those tend to be the 3 top tie-ins. I saw a study published a couple, well, it was reported on in October. I'm not quite sure when it was published, but it was conducted in 2016. And it was, American College Health Association polled almost 100,000 students. And what they found is that 17% of them were diagnosed or treated for anxiety in the last year, and almost 15% for depression. That's significant. That's above what the norm should be. College campuses, even right here nearby, I saw an article about TCC recently, waiting lists to see a counselor there because kids are finding they really need that. Now, it's not just social media causing that, but it certainly was identified as one of the top, what the psychologists believe are contributing to their problem. And sometimes it's hard to know which way we're going. Like, is it people who have more mental health problems that are finding social media more and delving into it, or is it the other way around? And I don't know. We're not, again, not enough studies yet, but certainly there are other things in college, adjustment things, and a lot of kids learning to do more on their own. Sometimes the parent who does too much for the student at home, thinking they're doing the best and helping them, get all those things done so they can get into college, and they get to college and they don't have mom or dad or grandma or whoever to really facilitate as much, and they hit that wall. So those were like the top, that and the economy. Those were the stressors of the economy were the top 3 things they found were related to why there was such an increase. So in the last, that was up, by the way, almost 12% from the last time this survey was done 10 years before. It was almost up 12% for anxiety and almost 11% for depression. So that's what we're seeing around the country. Why? Why do they think the social media use? Well, the first thing is people don't know how to stop. They're not putting the right boundaries in. So a lot of times looking right before bedtime is a bad thing, because you see something that upsets you. You see you weren't invited to a party, or so-and-so now likes so-and-so, and all these things that may seem little and trivial, but to our kids they're really not. They're living in a world where they have an opportunity really to almost give you a play-by-play of their day. We didn't do that. We didn't have that access. And it just wasn't a norm. But for these kids, for our kids right now, for this generation, it's almost as if it's called the fear of missing out, right? If I don't post, if I'm not out there, if I'm not engaging in this way, I'm not relevant. So that's really a lot of pressure to create events, to create the right picture, the right story, to be with the right people, and it's just so it's so glaring when you're not, and that's what I see a lot in the teenagers, but even some of the younger kids, is just knowing it's one thing when just people at school know that maybe you're not in the clique here or this or that, but when it goes everywhere, when it's your church family that knows, and it's whatever, your sports team and everything, everybody, can see what you're doing or what you're not doing, who invited you and who didn't invite you, and all that stuff. So it just really creates a lot of anxiety. So looking at that, especially right before bedtime, is not a great idea. And I know I mentioned last time that our teenagers face about a 12-hour sleep deficit every week, and that's part of it. Part of it is getting aggravated before you need to sleep and not being able to settle in. Another part is just not putting it up when you need to. I know I'm challenged my daughter daily. Don't study with your phone next to you. Put it away. And I've just had to do it for her sometimes. And don't be afraid to do that in the beginning. You ultimately want to teach your child how to regulate themselves and self-monitor themselves. But until they know how to do that, sometimes you have to do that for them. Because it's just so tempting, well, I don't want to miss out. I don't want to, people want their image liked in the first half an hour. If it's not liked in the first half an hour, Mom, it's not any good. And I'm like, okay, breathe, whoa. But seriously, they are that intense about these things. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, which picture, this one or that one, and are you sure my hair looks okay in this one, and on and on and on. Setting things up. You see kids setting things up, like, oh no, move that cereal box out of the way. It's going to ruin my picture. It's just like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, if you're not there yet, you're going to get there, and it's going to blow you up. It's just, wow. So again, just not knowing when you need to unplug. I said last time, don't let your children, if they have phones, don't let them sleep with them in their rooms, please. It's not good. I don't see any goodness about a computer in the room, a TV in the room, anything like that, because it's just a temptation and a distraction. So, and that's the other thing that I worry about with social media that the research points out is, you can't control the content. I mean, you can put some filters in, but there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get filtered out, and so as kids see things like teens, everything from the type of clothing they may be wearing that you may not feel great about, to the poses, the provocative poses, some over-sexualized poses, to alcohol involved, to, and again, as they get a little older, and as kids keep seeing this, they think, well, gosh, this is normal. My parents are just real strict. They're just off. And they become more curious, and it normalizes it. It desensitizes them to, no, this shouldn't be normal, So that's a fear, and there is research that shows as kids see this more, they begin to feel like, oh, this can't be too bad. This might be okay. Mom and Dad are just old-fashioned. So get worried about that too. The other thing, a lot of us use this social media to relieve boredom, right? We're like, oh, I have a few minutes here. I'm sitting in this office. I'm doing this. But the problem is, it reinforces the behavior. So every time I'm bored, if I pick this up and now I'm entertained for a few minutes, I'm going to be more and more likely to keep picking it up. It's like I can't stand to be quiet and still for a minute. Really bad for the body, really bad for the brain. You know, we need downtime, we need quiet time, we need disconnected time. But I see people less and less realizing that and less prioritizing that. So I talked last week about making sure that as parents, you know, you're not on it a lot of time. Be curious, how much does my child see me on a tablet or on a phone? And where do I use it? When do I use it? Where do I use it? How often do I use it? Because they're already picking up on that. They're already watching that. So, you know, we have rules at my house. You don't bring your phone to the table. And if you do, you know, I take it away. Even my husband. I'm like, no, you can't. And I know work situations, sometimes people feel like, oh, but I have to. I'm like, no, you don't. You can have a 20-minute dinner. There's nothing so urgent that you can't respond to it 20 minutes later. You know, seriously, we're not that important. But our kids are. Our family time is. Our connection, our true communication is that important. So, so think about that. Think about where you use it, how you use it, what your children are seeing, because they're paying attention and they're going to call you on it when they get older and you start to set limits. Trust me. Okay, so the boredom thing is we just have to show them other ways to get out there and to relieve boredom than go into an electronic thing. So where else am I on here? The other real fear is what you see people doing is being more absorbed in documenting like all the moments of their life and putting it out there than actually living them and actually being in the moment. And one thing I work with my clients a lot with is how to be more in the moment. You know, I help them see that when you're thinking about what happened yesterday, you're usually feeling some kind of regret or shame or disappointment. And that's not going to serve you well. And then on the other hand, when you're diving into the future, you're totally consumed with what if and what if not. And you can't control that. What if or what if not is going to happen. But worrying about it is not going to change that. Only in the moment can you make real change. So you have to stay and sit in the moment. But again, when you're worried about just showing your life in clips, you're not really engaging with others. You're just putting a story out there. So I worry about that. I also have a lot of people, maybe a lot's a stretch, but 10% maybe of kids that come in and their only relationships are online. I get very concerned about that. And Michelle, FBI agent Michelle, talked about that last week, about how easy it can be to be tricked about who's really talking to you and the dangers of that. But even if you do know who you're talking to, like you can see a picture, you Skype, you know it's a kid, etc. It's just a different, quality to that relationship of somebody in London who you talk to every day, and that's like your base, that's your stability. There's no like real people that, person's real, but you know what I mean, somebody you can physically interact with and actually go to a movie, go bowling, that kind of thing. So the kids that only form alliances online concern me, and it's usually because there's a pretty significant social anxiety, diagnosable social anxiety disorder, or generalized anxiety disorder, or both. So we need to be curious about that and wonder, what is it that makes this relationship work for you, and why not people who are right in your sphere? Why are you not connecting there? And these kids tend to be a lot of times they're homeschooled kids. And when I say homeschooled, I don't mean part of a group that gets together. I mean virtual school. I mean you sit in front of a computer all day and you do assignments and you turn them in, so there's very little peer interaction. And they're not involved in outside things, so they're just very isolated. So that's a real concern when you think your child is, and a lot of parents take them out of school because they say, well, they're being bullied, or they're not doing well, and they don't want to go to school, and it's a fight every day, and those kinds of things. And some of that's normal, especially at the beginning of the school year, or especially if there was an incident that occurred at school. But I would say it's something to consider very carefully before you do it, and understand all the impact, and if you were going to do it, make sure you have some social context still available for your child. And if they're not able to do that, then you need to seek professional help. You need to see what is causing such severe anxiety that they don't want to interact face-to-face with peers. So the other one is gaming. We talked about video games. Boys tend to be a little bit more influenced by that. This is the book we use to diagnose disorders, the DSM-5. They just recently in 2013 said we need to study gaming disorder. We need to see if that's a bona fide psychological disorder. And what they're finding, what the research is starting to show, is that it's very similar to like a drug addiction. You know, it's the same thing of needing to play, needing increased times to feel the same benefit, lying about how much time you're really on, wanting to stop, like trying to detach a little bit and not being successful. So I mentioned last time the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no more than 2 hours of screen time for a child. That's to include, you know, on a computer, on a gaming console, YouTubing, all that, 2 hours a day. And I promise you, I've had people in my office who told me they've played 10, 12, 14 hours straight. Yeah, wow. You know, and you know, when you have a gaming system in your room and mom and dad say, turn it off, you know, or, and you do, and then as soon as they fall asleep, whoop. So again, I'm a big fan of those kinds of opportunities being in public spaces and not in the privacy of a room. So it happens. It can get addictive. And then you have the online conversations too, right? You have these games where you join in with groups, and you can have settings where they're only people you allow in, and then there's freedom where you can choose anybody who wants to jump in. And boy, we cut that out very quickly, because you get language that makes you blush, and you know, you just don't know where that person is, how old they are. A lot of people, I mean, it's so easy to create a fake identity with all these fake demographics about oneself. So you really, you know, you don't want your 11-year-old playing with a 26-year-old. Just don't. So, but that is the way some kids socialize too, and they will tell you, well, this is the way I play, this is the way I relax. That's okay, unless that's the only way they can play and relax. If that's the only way, again, you need to be curious about that. Why? Because you should be able to interact face-to-face with people, and if you can't, we need to be curious what's the problem there. So I just think if we're not careful, the whole social media thing, that the connection can, for some people, can attempt to replace real, authentic connection, face-to-face, you know, interactions, and in almost all cases, that's just something to be concerned about, if that's the only way they have relationship outside of family. So let me take a breath. Questions so far?
No, that's all very interesting. I think about my daughter. She's so social now. I mean, she loves going to school. She's not really big on the academics, but the social.
The social part, good.
She just loves, and she loves the after-school program. Because I work full-time, and so, you know, I don't pick her up until 5 o'clock. And just recently, my husband retired, and so he can actually have her at home. But then we haven't put her at home yet, because they're getting ready for the holiday show and all this stuff. Because he just retired in October. And I'm wondering if, you know, maybe I should keep her in just to keep her busy doing stuff. Because I know she goes home, she's gonna want to watch TV and sort of veg out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is work to engage them. Yeah, right. Not having siblings. Yeah, I mean, it is something to think about, because the interaction with people, I think it's important to have some quiet time and downtime, and to watch some TV and have some. It's fine. It's just can't be your everything. So, yeah, but it's.
And she's so interested in the technology.
Like, Oh, they are.
Yes.
Yes.
And I let her use that, and I set
Yeah.
So it's limiting, because I know she would just stay on it all day.
And of course, they're Kindles that don't have internet access, that the only thing on them are books, and so that Kindles can be one of the safer pieces of technology out there.
Well, and our kids are getting a desktop computer for the playroom.
Uh-huh,
For
good.
Christmas.
I like that playroom.
Yes.
Yes.
They need it for school.
Sure,
I mean, even at
sure.
this point, our
That's
daughter
right.
does research for projects and
Yes.
things like that, but you can set
Set the
the
filters.
filters and
Yeah.
parameters and whatnot. But
And check the history. Don't
Yeah.
tell them you know how to check the history. Just go in occasionally and check the history and be curious. Say, I understand that you went, or tell me what you explored today. Sometimes it's great to give them the opportunity to kind of fess up. Sometimes they find something very accidentally.
Yeah.
In fact, that's a lot.
what works.
And you do need to talk with, but that's why you need to check the history and bring it up and say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry you saw that. That's not, I thought we had control over that, and that's not, something that you should have seen. And just talk to them about whatever it was, explain what was, if you have to already go there, explain what was happening and all of that. But there are some very innocent names for some things you really don't want your kids seeing, and I don't know how effective the filters are. You really have to watch Friends, too. I had an incident when my son was in 5th grade that one of the young men, he went over to his house and he was showing pornographic videos on his phone. And my son knew enough. He'd been coming to ARC classes, and he's like, Mom, I told him he should put that away. I said, well, good. I said, I'm really sorry you had to see that. And we talked through it, and I called his mom, said, she was mortified. But kids will be curious. They will be curious. I think it's important, if you haven't had that talk with you said 9, right? Maybe not 9, but definitely the 11-year-old, about things, about all the body parts, and start talking about what's safe and what's okay, and start explaining some terms. I certainly would do it before middle school, because if you don't, somebody else is going to be the first person to talk about those things, and you have no idea what kind of accuracy your child's going to get. Really. And I will say this, not to place too much fear out there, but I have been surprised by how many people in their late teens, early 20s have come in and shared about an experience where they were touched inappropriately by a friend as young as 7, 8, 9, and didn't know that it was odd. We were just playing around, and these things happen, and of course, a year later, 2 years later, I started to realize this isn't normal, this isn't okay. But it's really been traumatic for them, especially once they hit puberty and started to get in the dating world, wondering about their sexuality, wondering, well, why did I respond to that? Is there something wrong with me? It's been very painful. So, you always know about the friends of the family, adult friends, you gotta be cautious sometimes, but you don't think having a 7-year-old playmate or 8-year-old playmate over is going to be a danger, and it might be. So talking about, touching early on, not the whole talk, but just simply about, what nobody gets to touch or see, and or who can see that, basically your doctor and Mom, if you were hurting, you know what I mean? Something like that. It's really not too early for your 9-year-olds to even talk about that. So, and again, what's out there on the net and on the web, and it's scary, some of the things people are trying to normalize. Really scary. I don't know if y'all saw this story the other day in the news about a woman who posted, I think one of her family members taped her with an animal, doing things with an animal. This was like a 23-year-old. And the family member obviously thought it was abusive to the animal, and showed the SPCA. But gosh, the fact that you could go and see a video of that, very disturbing for kids to maybe run across that and see that as okay. Or
yeah, and I've noticed too, like we have like Amazon Prime, and there's some stuff, kids stuff, and they have like little grouping.
Yeah.
Download.
Yeah.
But it's like they'll put stuff in there that's not appropriate.
They will, and you have to watch that, because I will tell you.
I think it's a computer that's making the decision.
Well, right. Well, they're trying to see, gauge what you may or may not be interested in by what sites you search. So that's another thing. When you see commercials come up on the family computer, the kids' computer, and you see what advertisements are coming up, that's a clue too, what they've been expressing interest in. And it's really kind of freaky, but some of these programs that can be on your computer that you're kind of forced to have when you get it, track things like words in your emails and things like that to kind of figure how they need to target you. And that was something I talked about in my first presentation too, how marketers are targeting your kids. And a lot of times there is alcohol in the picture, and there is, and you're like, oh my gosh, but they're just, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about making a sale. So you have to be curious about that. So some signs. I wanted to get into signs of mental health trouble that you need to take more seriously. We'll just start with depression. Okay. There are times when kids just look sad, feel sad, cry. In boys, sometimes it looks more like anger. You might see more of a acting out physically and a yelling, raging, throwing. They tend to experience depression more in that realm than sadness, than crying, but it can be both. And for that, girls could present that way as well. But if it's going on for more than 2 solid weeks, where a person is emotional most of the day, where they may be having trouble, like I can't go to school, I'm not eating, or I'm eating all the time, I'm not sleeping well, or I'm sleeping way too much. I'm rejecting things I used to enjoy, things that like I don't want to go to basketball practice, I don't want to go to the mall with you, or I don't want to bake cookies, things that they normally like to do. If that's a solid 2 weeks, you have to start being curious and trying to talk with them what's going on. If it doesn't lift much after 2 weeks, it's really not too soon to bring them in. If all those things are causing them trouble in what we call their daily living activities, so that's going to school for kids. That would be the main one. Hygiene. A lot of times people miss that one, but if they stop caring for themselves the way they used to, and 9-year-old boys are not like loving showers. I know, I remember. It took them getting to 13 before we didn't have to say go. But when they're just not caring, when they're just rolling out of bed, and I don't care how I look, if their dressing changes a lot, how they're darker clothes, bleaker clothes, or just not caring how they look, if it's matched, if it's wrinkled, if it's dirty. That's when you need to be curious. I see it a lot. And it starts, sometimes I get kids that I really needed literally 2 years ago. When they start telling me about when this started, I was like, oh no. So they're having a lot of tough thoughts, They're really a lot of times their feelings are hurt a lot. They're seeing things, hearing things that they don't know what to do with, don't know how to respond to, don't know how to think about them in other ways so that they don't get so down. So it's just a good idea to check. There can be, you can just see a counselor for an assessment, and I would recommend that first. And the counselor will know after that session or a couple if psychological testing is recommended. And that's just kind of a higher level of teasing out, are there any other things going on? Because what we find in elementary school a lot is their undiagnosed learning disabilities. And that really creates a depression because the kids feel stupid. They're like, why can't I get this math? Why am I always bringing C's, and my best friend and my older brother, and they're making A's, and what's wrong with me? And sometimes it's ADHD, which is a real thing. It really is a real thing. And the kids are usually very smart, but they have so much going on, so many things they want to attend to that they can't pull it together to focus on when they need to all the time. And so they get frustrated. So sometimes the testing is really necessary because it will tease out, you might be depressed, but what is the cause of that depression? Are there other things? Many psychological disorders have a higher, what we call comorbidity rate, which means there's another one in there too. So if somebody has depression and a learning disability, or somebody has ADHD and a tic disorder, or something like that. So anyway, but that's why I say start with a counselor because she or he will know if testing is going to be helpful and if they suspect more is going on. So that, any questions about depression or signs of that? What to look for? Okay, isolation too, I should have said that. If they're spending more and more time away, trying to not be in you know, with the family or with friends, and they're kind of hiding out in their room more, I'd worry a little bit about that too. Yeah, they're going to need some alone time, and sometimes I say, you know, you can go in your room, but the door can stay open. You know, if I'm worried that there's something I'm not being told.
At what age should you start worrying about depression?
I mean, there are some kids that are depressed at 4 and 5, you know. A lot of it's about environmental stuff. Yeah. You know, if you have a loss of a parent, parent incarcerated, parents with addiction problems, attachment issues because you were maybe back and forth between caregivers. So those are, you know, those kids, you'll see it a lot sooner sometimes. But if there don't seem to be many environmental stressors, then the age where other social influence becomes stronger, it starts in elementary school, late elementary school, usually. So it gets the teenage years, the middle school years for girls in particular, really tough, really tough. They just are. Girls are very mean, and they're very group oriented. You know, so if you can't find a group in your niche, if you're always kind of odd person out, it's a very lonely place, and it takes a whole lot of strength and reassurance and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable again and again to find a place where you fit. And you're knocked down a lot, so it's a time to really be attentive, to really try and set up you know, interactions with, especially if you have other friends with girls the same age, that kind of thing. At the church, try the youth group here. I was on the core team here with the middle school youth group when my daughter was in middle school. Now I'm in high school core team, and it was really one of the few places I think it was safe for her, you know, to explore. That doesn't mean there are not cliques and groups there. They're everywhere. It's just the packed nature of girls. But yeah, they're tough years. So you have to really be on it. Anxiety is probably more common than depression, at least in what I see, but they're close. Statistically, what I shared earlier, that's true in college population too. And again, it's this performance anxiety. It's I'm not measuring up, you know, and a lot of it's coming from the posting. Oh, she got these boots. I get boots from Target. You know, you know, she posted her FCAT score and it was, you know, one number higher than mine. Whatever. Jenny invited her to this thing, but not me. All that stuff, you know, and it's just constantly feeling like, where do I fit in? Where do I stand? How am I relevant? To whom am I relevant? And I try really hard to convince the teens I see and the adolescents, if you're always constantly thinking about how other people are perceiving you, then why do you think other people are constantly thinking about you? And instead of them constantly thinking, what are you thinking of me? I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. I said, yeah. I said, most people at this age are very egocentric. They're actually thinking more about how you're perceiving them than they're really thinking about you. They're doing the same thing you are. And so sometimes they can say, oh, okay, I can buy into that, and I can, you know, calm down a little bit. But other times they're like, no, you don't understand. So. But anxiety is when you're having a lot of thoughts that you can't stop. They're unwanted thoughts. They're maybe unhappy, scary thoughts, or just frustration. You know, or sometimes they're just random thoughts, but they keep you up. You cannot sleep. You cannot calm down when you want to. You cannot focus on your schoolwork. You cannot complete an activity or organize or plan because you get stuck. You know, anxiety is about being stuck. So if you're seeing that and that sleep is affected, grades are affected, relationships are affected, it usually involves a lot of moodiness, which depression can too. But those are things to be worried about.
How do you tell the difference between that? All three of our children have been diagnosed with ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
All three are on medication. Sometimes our daughter, like, I just call it spinning in circles, because she, like, she can't focus on anything, she can't, I just look at her, I'm like, do something. You know,
Right, pick one.
Pick something.
Right, right.
It's like she's thinking about all these things that she's got to do.
Right.
And she can't do any of them.
And yeah, and that's what I mean by stuck. Yeah. Well, she may also have anxiety. There's a decent correlation. You know, that if you have ADHD, you are more likely to have anxiety than a person without ADHD. So you may want to be curious about that. With kids with ADHD, they need a lot of structure. And they need a lot of help learning how to organize, and they're sometimes as much as 2 to 3 years behind developmentally. That's not to say their intelligence is behind, but just their executive functioning is what we call it, that part of the brain that helps you organize, prioritize, time management, those kind of skills can be 2 to 3 years delayed. So you might have an 11-year-old, but her brain's functioning like an 8-year-old. And you have to remember that and be a little bit more interactive. A little bit more, okay, let's make the list. All right, which one are you going to do first? And actually sit with her and be with her in it. Keep the space wherever she's trying to do her work is free of other distractions as you can. Sometimes these kids feel better about having like white noise in the background or music without words, that kind of thing, just to sort of blank out other stuff that may entice them in their brains. You know, the bird flying by, the sound the cat made scratching the post. I mean, the change in the flicker of the light. I mean, they really see like everything. So I think that's what you want to do, is just say, okay, let's break it down. And they benefit from that too, steps, like breaking bigger tasks down into smaller steps and saying, okay, you know, this paper's due a week from now, so every day we need to do something toward it. Let's think of the different pieces that could be done toward it. You know, and it might be, I'm going to write the opening paragraph this night. I'm going to do the research this night. I'm going to write the first supportive paragraph on night 2. Do you know what I mean? You just have to help them see how to keep it from being so big, because they tend to procrastinate. They tend to think, oh, you know, I can't do this, and or hey, I'm just better if I wait till last minute. I don't know. I mean, some people, they definitely pull it off, but it creates so much anxiety for them, and usually takes a couple days to recover from all that last minute energy and being up till 3 in the morning. Not to mention it's not healthy for mom and dad. Yeah. So, and it also may be, when is she taking the medication, and does she need an afternoon dose, and has that been considered? Because that's where I see a lot of kids struggle. Like, they get a medication through the school day, and guess when it wears off? 3:30, 4 o'clock. Great, just in time for family time, homework time, dinner. And you know, that's important too, those family interactions, having some peace, and being able to function and get through the homework, that's important too. So sometimes it's about wondering if there needs to be a lunchtime dose or an afternoon, dose, a shorter acting thing, just to get through that 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock hour. Especially if they have after-school activities, and then they're not starting homework until 5 or 6 because they're going to ballet or something. Yeah. Does that help? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Eating disorders, I do see them in men and women, girls and boys. And, I've got one right now that I told the mom, I said, listen, if she's not going to eat more, I'm going to have to call somebody, and she may be looking at an inpatient hospitalization. And this girl does not look, she wasn't having anorexia nervosa, which is not eating enough and over-exercising, things like that, to kind of keep the weight low, but it's very unhealthy. And everybody else would see the body, image as unhealthy and too thin. She's actually somebody who probably is very slightly overweight. But, when she said, I usually skip breakfast. For lunch, I may have an apple, and for dinner, a baked potato. And by the way, I'm doing 45 minutes on the elliptical. I'm going about 4 miles a day. Nope, can't do that. That's not enough. You can't do that for weeks. And so, she's keeping a food diary for me right now, and mom's on it. So you have to, kids can be picky, about eating. You might see them really change, like today I like spaghetti, tomorrow I don't. Oh, hey, I'm just not hungry now. Those days happen, those nights happen, but when it's happening every day, or more days than not, you need to be worried and you need to say, no, you need to eat. Like, whatever it takes. No phone until I see you eat this. Because it's very prevalent, especially anxiety and eating disorders are highly correlated. Trauma and eating disorders. So if you have a child that has had a trauma in their life, and that can be anything from a personal trauma, like something that happened to them, versus something that happened to somebody they loved and cared about, and they know about that, and there's a loss. That's another high predictor. So you wonder about that. So watch the eating, make sure I'm a big, I think 3 meals a day, even if it's a small meal, at least 3 meals a day. Don't go out without breakfast. If you have to drink a special K drink, I'm cool with that. I don't care what you have, but you must have, well, I do care what you have, but no goo-goo clusters for breakfast, but they have to eat. And that can be a sign of anxiety or depression too, when they're, again, overeating or undereating. And a little bit before a test or before a stressful time, that's one thing if it's situational. But when it seems, and sometimes these problems start because of a situation, but then they don't stop. The pattern continues, and they get kind of hooked into it, and that's when you really need to be worried. So, and then I talked a little bit about the internet gaming disorder and when that's a problem. And again, when it's hours a day, when the child can't break away, when they get rageful, angry, mean, when they sneak it and you find out about it, when you genuinely see and hear them, I really want to stop this, I really want to stop this, and they can't. They may succeed for an hour or something. That's when you need to really be cautious and want to say, okay, this is not, we've got to find a new plan and maybe just remove it. That's, hopefully, you're not in that situation, but I do see people that I just cannot believe that's they don't leave the house because they don't want to miss the time, and it's more rewarding or less agonizing than other interactions, so they just stay home all day and do this. So, I have no idea what time it is or if I'm close. Okay, thank you.
We have 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to be up there to pick up the kids in 5 minutes.
Okay, so any further questions, suggestions?
So we're never buying a gaming system for our children? No.
Well, you can't ever, there's some, for the boys, I will tell you, it is social for them. Playing a game like Minecraft, for example, and that you can do on a PC, a computer. It's kind of interesting. There's a lot of building, architecture, higher level thinking, and it's not quite as there is some slaying and all that sort of stuff, but it's not like you're taking an AK-47 and blowing people up. So you do it with kids, so you're having to negotiate, well, how are we going to build this and who does that? And so there are some positive things to it. It's just all in moderation. You know what I mean? So it's not that it's inherently bad.
Play with friends too.
Right. And there are times you can't, make a play date possible. You can't go to so-and-so's house. So-and-so can't come to you. Work schedules, other schedules, sometimes just tiredness. You just don't want to do one more thing. So there are times like that when I think it's a good thing for the kids to connect to their friends. But if that's the only connection, if that's the only thing they ever do, then it's a problem. So. And what? Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I don't know how long you can keep it like that, because when their friends start playing and they go to their friends' homes and that kind of thing, that's when you get the hardcore press. My son's latest thing is, can I get that? What's that game called? The Grand Theft Auto. And my husband are like, yeah, no, not so much. He's 14. He's like, but I'm 14. I'm like, that's great. And when you're in your own house and paying your own bills, you can do what you want. But you're here. No. Yeah. This is really simple for us. No, that's not an appropriate game. But I can turn off them. Like, you can't turn off the images of prostitution and violence. You can't turn that off. So no, we're not doing it.
What do you think about parents friending their kids?
I think there's no problem with that. If you, because it helps you monitor. What they're. Hey, it's your right to make that rule. If you want to be on social media, then I've got to be a friend. If you don't, that's okay. But I have to be a friend. That's your choice. I strongly advocate that you're in charge and you get to make that decision. I can tell you I have no social media. I do not Instagram. I do not Facebook. Never have. Don't think I ever will. I just don't do it. My husband doesn't do it. Our kids have an Instagram account. And this is what they know, that we can go on it anytime we want and look at it, and we do. We do random spot checks. And we sometimes have questions, say, wait a minute, I need to know more about this. And that's how we do it. But I do know many parents who choose to, you know, be a friend so that they can access. And then there's, of course, there's apps where you can get every single thing your child's posted, right? You can pay for services and things where every text gets sent to you, and you can do that if you want to. I personally think if you're going to do that, you should let your child know that. I don't think it should be a covert thing. I think it's always best to be upfront and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And explain why. This is protection. You know, my favorite line with my kids that they really don't have a good comeback for is, I love you too much to say yes to this. That's it. That's how it is. So until I see you having the right maturity to set your own boundaries and know what's safe and not safe, I have to have that role. That's what God's asked me to do, that I take seriously, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's how I explain it.
The downside though to friending your kids is they would see stuff that some of your friends would post as well. So
yeah, and some people do 2 accounts. Some people do 2 accounts. They do one where they only have kids on it, and then they have their adult account. That's the way to get around that, to have 2 Instagram or Facebook profiles. But yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, privacy is just gone. It's crazy out the window. Yeah.
you like random things, like you could like the Tallahassee Democrat, a particular article.
That's right.
But then it shows all the time.
That's right.
So then a subject matter that you wouldn't want your kids to see
Pops up.
would pop
Right.
up as well.
Right, and that's why I said,
Look, Mom likes this. And I asked one of my friends one time, I was like, did you really like that? And that's when I started learning. Because I was like, that just didn't seem like a subject matter that,
yeah, exactly.
that they would necessarily like.
Exactly. No, that's why you create the separate account that's just where you don't have any of your friends on it. It's just for the sole purpose of being in touch. And you learn a lot, I'll tell you learn a lot about your children's friends, some of the things they post and what they like. It's extremely telling. And, we've had a lot of conversations, particularly with our oldest, about our 16-year-old daughter, about are these the kind of people that you want to, be friendly with if these are the choices, the things they seem to be drawn and attracted to. And she has very quickly decided in some cases, this isn't a good relationship, is it, Mom? No, I don't think so. So, but it's always great when they can come to that conclusion, when you can help lead them to that and help them, talk it out, as opposed to just saying, you can't be with that person, you can't do. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you just do. But anytime you can lead them to walking through the decision tree about and coming to that conclusion, the better, because they're going away. They're leaving the nest at some point, and you want to prepare them for that. You want to prepare them to be their own compass and know, what's healthy for them.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're not on Facebook, because I'm not really doing that.
No.
And I have a friend that's like pressuring me. She's like, you need to keep up with all that stuff,
Listen, I
like
have.
I'm a dinosaur, but I am getting a smartphone for Christmas. I'm gonna let you guys know.
Yeah, I was a little late on that board too, but
I
and
have a flip phone.
yeah, good for you. I love it.
I6S Plus or something.
I mean, there's no doubt they're convenient, but it's just so easy to overextend our time and our interest in our phones, and to be connecting with somebody through the phone when we're ignoring the person in front of us, our spouse, our child. I mean, that's crazy to me. So I feel stretched sometimes just to be who I need to be for the people immediately around me. I can't possibly take time from them. I don't feel like it's good to take time from them to touch base with people who I've lived really happily without for 20 years. I mean, it's just the way I see that. So.
Yeah, I see that a lot at the university. Kids are on the phone, but it seems like recently, last year or two, it's kind of done a little bit of a switch where they're not,
I mean, some people
they're talking to the person across the table from them.
That's right. Yeah, and I have a few teens that I've convinced to try and experiment. Why don't you go blind for a week? Why don't you not post, not look, And I've had at least one just absolutely go off the grid. She deleted all her accounts, and she tells me I'm so much happier. She said, people ask me sometimes, why aren't you on, and why not da-da-da? She said, but now I don't have to see all that stuff that was upsetting me. And I'm like, exactly. If something causes you more distress than it causes benefit, you are the one that needs to cut it out of your life. That's your choice, whether you keep it or whether you ditch it. And she ditched it, and I was so proud of her, and it's really made a difference. She, from seeing me every week to once a month. Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of live in a hole where I can't get cell reception off of T-Mobile.
Nice.
I like it.
Nice.
So I only get it when I get in the car and going to work. And
So your boundaries are determined for you. Yeah.
That's why I like cruise vacations, because he can't use his phone.
Oh.
On a cruise ship. In
Yes.
the middle of the ocean.
Yes. Not unless you want to pay a whole lot.
Yeah.
Not worth it.
I'm in sales,
Okay.
so it's kind of.
What's that?
I said I'm in sales, so it's.
you don't want us to say all the other cruise.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you still, I still think it's,
I work 2 time zones, so it's like.
yeah, and that, yeah, it's hard when you have requirements like that. But I still, and I guess sometimes, maybe it's true that sometimes 20 minutes might make a difference, but you have to ask yourself at what cost. Because every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else.
I've gotten better. I set it on the counter for dinner.
Great,
So.
great. Yeah, because exactly. Yeah, they know, they're watching and they're learning. Yep. Okay, I'll let y'all go get your kids. Thanks for coming.